The massive hangar bay echoed with angry voices. Empress stood on the observation platform, her hands gripped tight on the metal railing as she stared at her ship. The floated in the artificial gravity field, silent and dead. 6 weeks ago, it had been the pride of the Empire. Now it was nothing more than expensive scrap metal. "Explain it to me again," said. Her voice was calm, but everyone in the room knew that tone. It was the calm before the storm. Master Engineer stepped forward. He was tall and thin, with the confident posture of someone who had spent his whole life being the person in every room. He carried a data tablet that glowed with complex diagrams and numbers. "Your Majesty, the quantum fold drive matrix has collapsed. The configuration is impossible according to all known physics. We have run every diagnostic, checked every system, consulted with experts from 12 different species. The pattern of failure does not match any recorded incident in galactic history." Turn to look at him. 28 engineers, 28 of the best minds in the galaxy, and you're telling me none of them can fix one ship. Shifted uncomfortably. "The problem is not simple mechanical failure, Your Majesty. This is quantum technology. The drive exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. When it collapsed, it created a cascade effect that—" "I don't want explanations," interrupted. "I want results. Do you know what the other empires are saying? They're calling me weak. They say the great Empress can't even keep her own ship running. The dynasty has moved 3 battle fleets to our border. The trade consortium has increased tariffs on our exports by 40%, all because I've been stuck here for 6 weeks with a broken ship." The hangar fell silent. Everyone knew the political situation was getting dangerous. The empire was powerful, but it depended on the perception of strength. A ruler who couldn't solve a simple engineering problem looked incompetent. Weakness invited attack. Bowed his head. "I understand, Your Majesty. We are working every hour to find a solution. Perhaps if we had more time." "Time?" laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Time is the one thing we don't have. Every day this ship sits broken, I lose more credibility. Every day my enemies grow bolder." She walked along the platform, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Below, dozens of engineers worked around their tools and scanners creating a symphony of beeps and hums. They had been working non-stop for weeks, and they looked exhausted. One young engineer, a woman named Sara, looked up at the Empress with tired eyes, saw the desperation there. They wanted to fix the ship. They just didn't know how. "Your Majesty," said a voice from behind. It was Chief Advisor. She was older, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen many political storms. "Perhaps we should consider alternative options. We could commission a new ship, or—" "No," his voice was firm. "The is not just a ship. It's a symbol. If I abandon it, I'm admitting defeat. I'm showing the galaxy that when things get difficult, I give up and run away. Is that the message you want to send?" Bowed, "Of course not, Your Majesty." Turned back to the ship. It was beautiful, even in its broken state. The hull was made of crystalline alloy that caught the light and reflected it in rainbow patterns. The quantum fold drives, when they worked, could bend space itself and travel faster than any other ship in the galaxy. It was supposed to be the future of technology. Instead, it had become a monument to failure. An idea formed in its mind. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Open a galaxy-wide broadcast channel," she said suddenly. Looked shocked. "Your Majesty." "You heard me. I want every planet, every station, every ship in the known galaxy to hear what I'm about to say." Stepped closer, concern on her face. "Your Majesty, are you sure? A public announcement could—" "Could what? Make things worse?" smiled grimly. "Things are already as bad as they can get. Open the channel." The communications officer scrambled to comply. Within minutes, the broadcast was ready. Billions of beings across the galaxy would see and hear whatever said next. Straightened her uniform. and looked directly into the camera drone that hovered before her. "This is Empress of the Empire. I have a challenge for the galaxy. My ship, though, has been damaged. 28 of the finest engineers in known space have tried to repair it. All have failed. So now I make this offer to anyone from any world, any species, any background. If you can fix my ship, I will grant you one wish. Anything within my power to give, I will give it. Money, land, title, technology, anything you desire." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I've heard the whispers. People say I'm weak. They say the Empire is failing. They say I can't solve a simple problem. So here's my response. If you're so good, prove it. If you think you're smarter than my engineers, come and show me. Fix my ship and I'll make you rich beyond your wildest dreams." Leaned closer to the camera, her eyes burning with intensity. "But know this, I don't accept excuses. I don't accept failure. 28 engineers have told me this problem is impossible. I'm betting that somewhere in this vast galaxy, there's someone who doesn't believe in impossible. Someone who can look at this ship and see what everyone else has missed. If that's you, come to Prime. My door is open." She made a cutting gesture, and the broadcast ended. The hangar was dead silent, looked horrified, looked worried, but felt a strange sense of relief. She had thrown down the gauntlet. Now she would see what the galaxy was made of. "Your Majesty," began carefully, "with respect, this could attract undesirable attention. Con artists, dreamers, people with no real skills who just want the reward." "Then screen them," said. "Captain Wu will handle security. Anyone who applies gets a basic technical interview. If they're obviously wasting our time, send them away. But if there's even the smallest chance they might know something we don't." She turned to look at the again. "We have to try." Over the next 3 days, applications poured in from across the galaxy. Thousands of people claimed they could fix the ship. Most were eliminated immediately. A few made it past the initial screening, traveled to Prime, looked at the ship, and admitted they had no idea what to do. But the applications kept coming, and somewhere in that flood of messages, one stood out, not because it was impressive or confident, but because it was submitted by a 12-year-old girl on behalf of her father, a human engineer from a forgotten frontier station. The girl's name was, and her father's name was. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to change the galaxy. The frontier station called Haven's Edge floated in the darkness between star systems. It was a small place, the kind of station that serviced merchant ships and traders who couldn't afford the fancy ports closer to the galactic core. The walls were old metal that had been patched and repaired 100 times. The air recyclers made a constant humming noise that everyone learned to ignore. In a small repair dock on the lower levels, wiped grease from his hands and looked at the ancient freighter he'd just finished fixing. The ship's captain had paid him in credits and a case of protein bars. Not much, but enough to feed his daughter for another week. "Dad," voice echoed through the dock. She came running, her school tablet clutched in her hands. At 12 years old, she was all energy and curiosity, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Smiled despite his exhaustion. "What is it, sweetheart? Did you finish your homework already?" "Dad, look at this," thrust the tablet at him. On the screen was a news broadcast showing Empress standing before her damaged ship. Hit play and listen to the Empress's challenge. "One wish, Dad, anything she can give. And you know about quantum fold drives. You worked on them back on Earth, remember?" Sighed. "That was 20 years ago. I worked on early experimental models. The is cutting-edge technology, way beyond anything I ever touched." "But you could try." Eyes were bright with hope. "Dad, the reward. You could wish for the surgery you need," the doctors said. "The doctors said I have a few more years," interrupted gently. He didn't like talking about his failing heart. It scared, and there was nothing they could do about it anyway. The surgery cost more money than he would make in a lifetime. "A few years isn't enough," his voice cracked. "I need you for more than a few years. I need you to see me graduate, to walk me down the aisle someday, to meet your. A few years isn't enough, Dad. Pulled his daughter into a hug. She was crying now, and it broke his heart. I know, baby, I know, but this is the Empress of the Empire. She's not going to listen to an old human mechanic from a frontier station. She said anyone, said stubbornly. She said the door is open. Dad, please let me submit your name. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. Wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that it was foolish to hope for miracles. But when he looked into his daughter's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to crush that hope. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, you can submit my name, but don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. There are thousands of engineers smarter than me. Hugged him tight, then ran off to fill out the application. Shook his head and went back to work. He forgot about it almost immediately. There was no way they would respond. 3 days later, a military shuttle arrived at Haven's Edge. Captain Wu stepped off the ramp, his uniform crisp and his expression all business. He looked around the shabby station with barely concealed disgust. I'm looking for a human named, he announced to the station administrator. 10 minutes later, stood before the captain, still wearing his grease-stained coveralls. Stood beside him, trying not to look terrified. You're, Wu asked, looking skeptical. The engineer who applied to fix the Empress's ship. I didn't exactly apply, began. My daughter. Your qualifications list experience with quantum fold drive systems. Is that accurate? Well, yes, but that was a long time ago. I worked on Earth's first experimental models before the technology was perfected. I've been doing basic repairs for the last 15 years. I really don't think. The Empress has invited you to Prime, Wu interrupted. You will board my shuttle immediately. Blinked, I'm sorry, what? You were invited by the Empress, Wu said slowly, as if speaking to a child. That means you come, it's not optional. But I can't just leave. I have work, I have responsibilities, my daughter. We'll come with you, Wu said. Pack your things, we leave in 1 hour. Looked at, she was grinning from ear to ear. There was no way out of this now. The journey to Prime took 2 days on the military shuttle. Spent most of it in quiet panic, wondering what he had gotten himself into. Spent it glued to the viewports, watching as they traveled deeper into the core systems where the stars were thick and the planets were rich. When they arrived at Prime, his breath caught. The planet was beautiful, a blue and green jewel surrounded by orbital stations and defensive platforms. The Imperial Palace was visible from orbit, a massive structure that glowed with its own light. They landed in the palace hangar where they waited. Stepped off the shuttle carrying his old toolbox, the same one he'd had since his merchant marine days. It was battered and covered in stickers from a dozen different worlds. The hangar was enormous. Hundreds of people worked around the damaged ship, all of them looking tired and frustrated. At the center of it all stood Master Engineer, surrounded by his team of specialists. Looked up as approached. His eyes went wide, then narrow with contempt. This is the great engineer. His voice dripped with sarcasm. A human in dirty coveralls with a toolbox held together with tape. Felt his face flush. I didn't ask to come here. Your Empress invited me. The Empress invited anyone fool enough to think they could succeed where the greatest minds in the galaxy have failed, sneered. Tell me, human, what makes you think you can fix quantum fold technology when you've spent the last 15 years fixing garbage scows on a frontier station? Other engineers laughed, saw pity and amusement on their faces. He felt small and foolish, squeezed his hand. I never said I could fix it, replied quietly, but I'd like to look. Oh, you'd like to look, spread his arms wide. The primitive wants to look. Please, by all means, examine the ship with your ancient multimeter and your hand tools. I'm sure you'll discover something that our quantum scanners and AI diagnostic systems somehow missed. More laughter, stood there feeling the weight of their mockery. He wanted to leave, to take and go back to Haven's Edge where he belonged. Then a voice cut through the laughter. "Let him look." Everyone turned. Empress walked across the hangar floor, her presence commanding instant silence. She was younger than expected, maybe in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She stopped in front of and studied him. "You're the human engineer." "Yes, Your Majesty," said, bowing awkwardly. He'd never met royalty before. "You have experience with quantum fold drives." "Some, Your Majesty. But it's been many years, and my experience is with much simpler systems than your ship." Tilted her head. "Most of the engineers who come here have bragged about their expertise. They've made grand promises. You're the first one to admit limitations. Why did you come if you're not confident you can fix the ship?" Glanced at, who was staring at the Empress with wide eyes. "My daughter submitted my application, Your Majesty. She believes in me more than I believe in myself." Something flickered in his eyes. She looked at, then back at. "What would you wish for if you succeeded?" Swallowed hard. "My daughter needs an education. A real one, not what she can get on a frontier station. And I need medical treatment that I can't afford. That's all, Your Majesty, nothing grand." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You have 24 hours to examine the ship. If you think you can fix it, tell me how. If you can't, I'll arrange transport back to your station, and there will be no punishment for trying." She turned to, give him full access, answer his questions, show him everything. Looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but he bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." As walked away, stood there with his old toolbox, surrounded by hostile engineers and impossible technology. Squeezed his hand again. "You can do this, Dad," she whispered. Looked up at thee and took a deep breath. He had 24 hours to either save his daughter's future or prove he was just another foolish dreamer. Either way, there was only one thing to do. "All right," he said quietly, "let's get to work." Stood before the massive holographic display that showed the internal systems. Lines of diagnostic data scrolled past in languages he barely recognized. Master Engineer stood beside him, arms crossed, wearing an expression of supreme boredom. "These are the quantum field readings from the drive core," said, gesturing at the display. "As you can see, the dimensional phase alignment is completely collapsed. We've tried recalibrating the field generators, replacing the quantum processors, even rebuilding the entire containment matrix from scratch. Nothing works. The system refuses to stabilize." Studied the hologram, trying to make sense of the complex data. He recognized maybe one term in 10. This technology was so far beyond what he'd worked with on Earth that it might as well be magic. "Can you show me the ship itself?" asked. Raised an eyebrow. "The ship itself? You want to ignore all the diagnostic data and just look at the hardware?" "Yes." Sighed dramatically. "Fine, waste your time however you like. Sora, take the human to the drive bay." A young engineer stepped forward. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes, but she managed a small smile. "This way, please." As they walked toward this loading ramp, heard the other engineers laughing behind him. He tried to ignore it. "Don't mind them," Sora said quietly. "They're just frustrated. We've all been working on this for so long with no progress. It makes people mean." "It's okay," said. "I've been underestimated before." Sora led him through the ship's corridors to the main engineering section. The drive bay was enormous, filled with machinery that hummed with residual power. Even broken, the quantum fold drives were impressive. They looked like massive crystals suspended in magnetic fields, surrounded by processors and coolant systems and power conduits. Set down his toolbox and pulled out his flashlight. It was an old-fashioned LED light, the kind that had been obsolete for decades even on Earth. Sora watched with barely concealed confusion as he clicked it on. "You're going to examine the drives with a flashlight." "Sometimes the old ways work best," said. He walked around the drive assembly, shining his light into the spaces between components. He was looking for something specific, though he wasn't quite sure what yet. Appeared at the door, arms still crossed. Finding anything interesting with your primitive light source. Ignored him. He got down on his hands and knees and crawled under the drive assembly, his flashlight gripped between his teeth. The space was tight and filled with cables and pipes. His old knees protested, but he kept going. That's when he saw it. On the side of one of the main coupling assemblies there were scorch marks. Small ones, barely visible but definitely there. And around the marks there was a strange residue, something oily and dark. Pulled himself out from under the drive and stood up, dusting off his coveralls. "When was the last maintenance cycle on the ship?" he asked. Looked annoyed at the question. "Maintenance records are in the computer system. Why does that matter?" "Just answer the question, please." Pulled up a data screen on his wrist device. The last scheduled maintenance was 9 weeks ago, 2 weeks before the drive failure. And who performed the maintenance? A certified maintenance crew, obviously. What does this have to do with anything? Turned to Sara. "Can you tell me who was on that crew?" Sara looked uncomfortable. She glanced at, then back at. The maintenance crew was replaced about 3 months ago. The Empress wanted more qualified technicians working on her ship, so the old crew was transferred and a new one brought in. "More qualified," repeated. He knelt down again and used a small scraper from his toolbox to collect some of the oily residue. He held it up to the light, examining it carefully. "What are you doing?" demanded. "Stop messing around and explain yourself." Stood up and faced the master engineer. "Have you checked the maintenance logs? Actually read them, I mean, not just that maintenance was done." Of course maintenance was performed. Standard procedure is followed on all Imperial vessels. "That's not what I asked. Did you read the logs? Did you check what specific tasks were performed and what materials were used?" His face flushed with anger. "We are trying to solve a quantum physics problem, not audit maintenance paperwork. The scanners found no evidence of mechanical failure. The damage is at the quantum level, in the field alignment itself. Your little smudges and grease stains are irrelevant." "Are they?" Held up his finger with the residue on it. "Your scanners were looking for quantum anomalies and exotic particles, right? High-level stuff. Did anyone bother to check the simple things?" "Simple things," his voice rose. "This is the most advanced ship in the galaxy. There are no simple things on the—" "Every ship has simple things," said calmly. "Bolts and lubricants and seals and couplings. Basic mechanical components that hold everything together. Even the quantum drive needs physical parts to work." A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Explain." Everyone turned. Empress stood there, flanked by her advisor. How long had she been listening? Bowed quickly. "Your Majesty, I found scorch marks and residue on the drive couplings. I think someone used the wrong lubricant during maintenance." The silence that followed was deafening, then started laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh. "The wrong lubricant," he gasped between laughs. "You think the quantum fold drives failed because of grease? Do you have any idea how absurd that sounds?" "I've seen it happen before," said quietly. "Different technology, but the same basic problem. On merchant ships, if you use the wrong lubricant on certain components, it can cause cascade failures in the electrical systems. The lubricant breaks down, creates residue, and that residue interferes with the system's operation." "This isn't a merchant ship," shouted. "This is quantum technology. The drives operate on principles that still depend on physical components," interrupted. "Your quantum field generators are mounted on physical couplings. Those couplings need lubrication. If the wrong lubricant was used, and if it contained trace elements that interfere with the quantum field alignment, it could cause exactly the kind of cascading failure you described." Stepped forward, her eyes intense. "Is this possible?" Opened his mouth to argue but spoke first. "It's an interesting theory, unconventional but interesting. The question is, can it be tested?" Nodded. Check the maintenance logs, see what lubricant was used. Then check if that lubricant is compatible with quantum field technology. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, if you're right, we've wasted 6 weeks chasing quantum ghosts when the problem was basic maintenance. Finished. She turned to, get the maintenance logs, now. Looked like he wanted to argue, but the Empress's tone left no room for discussion. He pulled up the logs on the main computer system, his movements stiff with anger. The logs showed routine maintenance. Filters changed, systems checked, components lubricated. Everything looked normal, then saw it. There, he pointed. Look at the lubricant specification. Read the entry, his face going pale. That's not the right specification. This is a general-purpose synthetic lubricant. The requires specialized quantum-compatible lubricant for the drive couplings. Why would they use the wrong lubricant? Sora asked. The new maintenance crew said. They were more qualified on paper, but they didn't know this specific ship. They saw lubricant and used what they had. It's a common mistake, especially with new crews. His voice was very quiet. So you're telling me that my ship was destroyed by incompetent maintenance? Not incompetent, Your Majesty, said carefully. Just unfamiliar. The new crew didn't know the specific requirements. They followed standard procedure for most ships, which unfortunately wasn't right for this ship. Was staring at the maintenance logs like they had personally betrayed him. But the scanners, we ran every diagnostic. Your scanners were looking at the quantum level, explained. They saw the field collapse and assumed it was a design flaw or some exotic malfunction. Nobody thought to check if the mechanical components were contaminated because mechanical components aren't supposed to affect quantum systems. Except they do, said thoughtfully. Because the quantum systems are mounted on mechanical components, it's so obvious and yet we all missed it. Looked at with new respect, can you fix it? If I'm right about the cause, yes, said. We drain the contaminated lubricant, clean all the couplings thoroughly, replace it with the correct specification lubricant, and the quantum field should realign naturally. The system isn't broken, it's just being interfered with. And if you're wrong, then the ship stays broken, and I go home having wasted everyone's time. Studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her in weeks. Master Engineer, she said, you will assist with the repair procedure. Give him whatever he needs. If this works, she paused. If this works, I'm going to have some serious questions about how we train our engineers. Bowed stiffly. The humiliation on his face was clear, but there was also something else, a grudging respect. As left the drive bay, allowed himself a small smile. He'd found the problem. Now came the hard part, actually fixing it. The entire engineering team gathered in this drive bay. Word had spread quickly through the palace that the human mechanic claimed to have found the problem. Some came because they were curious. Others came because they didn't believe it and wanted to watch him fail. Stood before the assembled engineers, his old toolbox at his feet, sat on a cargo container nearby, watching her father with pride. Empress stood on an observation platform above, beside her. The entire scene felt like a trial. Explain your theory, commanded, and explain it so everyone can understand. Took a deep breath. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he owed these people an explanation. The quantum fold drives are the most advanced technology in the galaxy, he began. But they're still machines, and all machines, no matter how advanced, depend on basic mechanical components working together. He walked over to the drive assembly and pointed at the massive crystalline structures. These quantum field generators create the dimensional fold that lets the ship travel faster than light. They work by manipulating space itself at the quantum level. It's incredible technology. Stood with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical but attentive. But, continued, These generators are mounted on physical couplings. Those couplings need to be lubricated so they can adjust and align the generators properly. The lubricant has to meet very specific requirements because it's in direct contact with components that generate quantum fields. He held up a small sample vial containing the dark residue he'd scraped from the couplings. 3 months ago, the maintenance crew was replaced. The new crew performed standard maintenance, including lubricating all moving parts, but they used the wrong lubricant. A young engineer near the back spoke up. How could the wrong lubricant cause quantum field collapse? Because the lubricant they used contains trace amounts of certain elements, explained. When exposed to the quantum field over time, these elements create interference. It's subtle at first, barely noticeable, but over weeks the interference builds up. The quantum field generators try to compensate, which creates more stress on the system. Eventually, the whole thing cascades into failure. Stepped forward, but our scanners analyzed every component of the quantum drive system. We found no contamination. Because your scanners were looking for quantum anomalies, said, exotic particles, dimensional distortions, field fluctuations, all high-level stuff. The contamination is just simple chemistry, wrong lubricant in the wrong place. Your quantum scanners looked right past it because it wasn't what they were programmed to detect. Sora raised her hand tentatively. So the drive system itself isn't damaged. It's just being interfered with. Exactly, said, feeling more confident now. Think of it like trying to listen to music with someone making noise next to you. The music system works fine, but you can't hear it properly because of the interference. Remove the noise and the music plays perfectly. Leaned over the railing of the observation platform. If your theory is correct, what's the repair procedure? Pulled a data pad from his toolbox. It was old and scratched, but it worked. I've outlined the steps. First, we drain all the contaminated lubricant from every coupling in the drive system. Then we clean each coupling thoroughly with a solvent that won't damage the components. Finally, we replace the lubricant with the correct specification that's compatible with quantum field technology. How long? Asked. If we work carefully, about 3 hours. The room erupted in noise. 3 hours to fix what 28 engineers couldn't fix in 6 weeks. It was either genius or madness. His voice cut through the chatter. 3 hours. We've spent 6 weeks on this problem. Because you were solving the wrong problem, said simply. You were trying to fix damaged quantum technology, but the quantum technology isn't damaged. It just needs the right maintenance. Was quiet for a moment. Then, to his surprise, he nodded slowly. It makes sense. I don't want to admit it, but it makes sense. We assumed that because the failure occurred at the quantum level, the cause must also be at the quantum level. We never considered that the cause could be something as mundane as maintenance materials. That's the problem with being too specialized, said gently. Sometimes you get so focused on the complex stuff that you forget about the simple stuff. I've made the same mistake plenty of times. Stood up. Then let's test the theory. Begin the repair procedure. If it works, excellent. If it fails, we're no worse off than we were before. Organized the work like he was conducting an orchestra. He assigned teams to different sections of the drive system, carefully explaining what needed to be done. Some of the engineers resented taking orders from a human in dirty coveralls, but most were too curious to see if the plan would work. Sara and a young engineer named Jin worked directly with. They drained the old lubricant into collection containers, watching as the dark, contaminated fluid slowly emptied from the system. It took nearly an hour just to drain it all. Look at this, Jin said, holding up a container of the old lubricant. You can see the residue settling at the bottom. How did we miss this? Because you weren't looking for it, said. And that's okay. You can't check everything. The key is learning from mistakes. The cleaning process was tedious. Every coupling had to be wiped clean, then flushed with solvent, then wiped again. insisted on checking each one personally, making sure no contamination remained. Watched the work with growing fascination. "This is embarrassing," he muttered to who had come down from the observation platform. "The solution was in the maintenance manual the whole time. We just didn't think to check it." "Don't be too hard on yourself," said. "When you're told there's a quantum physics problem, you look for quantum physics solutions. It takes a different perspective to see past the obvious." Finally, after 2 hours of careful work, the system was clean. Personally, the specification on the replacement lubricant before they began the refilling process. It was a special synthetic blend designed specifically for quantum field environments, expensive and rare. "This is what should have been used from the start," explained to Jin and Sora. "See the quantum-compatible certification. This lubricant won't interfere with field alignment." As they carefully refilled each coupling, the tension in the drive bay grew. This was the moment of truth. Either's theory was right, and the ship would work again, or it was wrong, and they just wasted 3 hours on a wild guess. The last coupling was filled, stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. "That's it," he said. "The system should be ready to power up." Had been watching the entire time. Now she spoke into her communicator. "Bridge, this is the Empress. Prepare to initialize the quantum fold drives on my command." The drive bay grew quiet. Hundreds of people held their breath. "Initialize drives," ordered. The quantum field generators began to glow, soft at first, then brighter. The massive crystals hummed with power, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. Diagnostic displays throughout the bay flickered to life, showing system readings. "Field alignment at 40%, a technician called out. 50%, 60%. The glow intensified. Watched the generators carefully, looking for any sign of instability. The hum grew louder, more powerful. 80%, 90%. The entire ship seemed to come alive. Power flowed through systems that had been dead for weeks. Lights brightened. Computer cores activated. There was waking up. "Field alignment at 100%, the technician announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "All systems nominal. Quantum fold drives are fully operational." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the drive bay erupted in cheers. Engineers who had worked for weeks with no success were laughing and crying and hugging each other. The relief was overwhelming. Felt his knees go weak. It had worked. His simple theory had actually worked. Ran to him and threw her arms around him. "You did it, Dad. You did it." Approached slowly, his expression complex. Pride, embarrassment, and respect all mixed together. He extended his hand too. "I owe you an apology," said formally. "I judged you based on appearance and background rather than knowledge and skill. That was wrong of me. You saw what we all missed, and you've taught me a valuable lesson about assumptions." Shook his hand. "No apology needed. I've been underestimated before and I've underestimated others. It's part of being human." Empress descended from the observation platform. The crowd parted before her. She stopped in front of and slowly she smiled. "You fixed my ship," she said simply. "With grease and common sense and 3 hours of work, you accomplished what 6 weeks of advanced theory couldn't. I am impressed, of Haven's Edge. Very impressed indeed." Bowed, "I was lucky, Your Majesty. Lucky to see what others missed." "Luck had nothing to do with it," said. "You succeeded because you approached the problem differently. Because you remembered that even the most advanced technology is still built on simple foundations." She gestured to and the other engineers. "We will all remember this lesson. Before we check the quantum fields, we check the oil. Before we blame exotic particles, we check the simple parts." Turn back to, "You've earned your wish. Tomorrow we will discuss what you desire. Tonight celebrate. You've saved the Empire whether you know it or not." As the Empress walked away, stood there, surrounded by celebrating engineers, holding his daughter close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, A simple mechanic from a forgotten station had shown the galaxy that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. The Imperial throne room was nothing like had imagined. He'd expected something cold and intimidating, all metal and stone and guards. Instead, it was surprisingly warm. Large windows let in natural sunlight. Plants grew in carefully tended gardens along the walls. The throne itself was simple, made of polished wood rather than gold or precious metals. Empress sat on that throne now, with standing to her right. To her left stood Master Engineer, looking far more humble than he had a few days ago. The throne room was packed with nobles, officials, and military officers. News cameras hovered in the air, broadcasting to the entire galaxy. Stood in the center of it all, wearing the cleanest clothes he owned. They were still shabby compared to the fine garments everyone else wore, but he held his head high. Stood beside him, her hand gripped tight in his. She was trying very hard not to look nervous. "Let this assembly bear witness," announced, her voice carrying through the hall. "3 days ago I issued a challenge to the galaxy. I promised one wish to anyone who could repair my ship. The 28 of the finest engineers in known space had tried and failed. The problem was declared unsolvable, impossible." She paused, letting the words sink in. Then came a human engineer from a frontier station called Haven's Edge. A man with no titles, no credentials from prestigious academies, no advanced degrees in quantum physics. A man who works with his hands, who carries an old toolbox, who knows machines not from textbooks but from years of practical experience. Stood and descended from her throne, walking toward. The cameras tracked her every movement. In 3 hours, accomplished what 6 weeks of advanced theory could not. He fixed not with complex calculations or cutting-edge technology, but with common sense and a mechanic's eye for detail. He looked past the quantum physics and remembered that even the most advanced machines are built on simple foundations. She stopped in front of and smiled. "The galaxy is watching. They want to know what a man like you will ask for. Some expected you to demand wealth. Others thought you might ask for power or position. What is your wish?" His throat was dry. He'd thought about this moment for 2 days, going over his words again and again. Now, standing before the Empress with billions watching, his mind went blank. Then he felt squeeze his hand and the words came. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I'm just a mechanic. I don't need wealth or power. What I need, what I want, is for my daughter to have opportunities I never had." He looked down at, whose eyes were shining with tears. "I want to attend the Imperial Academy. I want her to get a real education, the kind that will let her become anything she wants to be. An engineer, a scientist, a teacher, whatever she chooses. I want her to have the future she deserves." Nodded slowly, "And for yourself?" Hesitated. This part was harder to say out loud. "I have a heart condition, Your Majesty. The doctors say I have a few years left without surgery, but the surgery costs more than I could ever afford. I'd like to be around to see my daughter grow up, to see her graduate, to see her succeed. I want enough time to be a proper father." The throne room was absolutely silent, could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Then spoke, and her voice was soft. "That's it. Education for your daughter and medical treatment for yourself. You saved the empire from political collapse. You prevented what could have been a war. You humbled my engineers and taught them valuable lessons. And all you ask for is school and a doctor." "That's all a father needs, Your Majesty," said simply. "A future for his daughter and enough health to see it. What else matters?" Something changed in his expression. Her formal mask slipped, and for a moment she looked almost emotional. "Your wish is granted," she said. "Will be enrolled in the Imperial Academy with a full scholarship, including housing and living expenses. You will receive the finest medical care available at no cost. The surgery will be scheduled immediately." Felt like he might collapse from relief. Was crying openly now, happy tears streaming down her face. But wasn't finished. However, she continued, I think your wish is too modest. You've done more than fix a ship. You've shown the entire galaxy something important. You've reminded us that expertise comes in many forms, that wisdom isn't always found in academies, and that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. She turned to address the entire throne room, her voice rising. Therefore, I am creating a new position, Chief Engineering Consultant to the Empire. This position will advise the Imperial Engineering Corps on practical matters, ensure that we never again lose sight of fundamentals in pursuit of theory, and teach the next generation of engineers to think like mechanics as well as scientists. Turned back to smiling. And you of Haven's Edge will hold this position, a generous salary, full benefits, and a workshop in the palace where you can work on whatever projects interest you. You'll also teach if you're willing. I think our engineers could learn a great deal from you. Stood there stunned. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say yes, suggested. Yes, managed. Yes, of course. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you so much. The throne room erupted in applause, saw clapping enthusiastically, genuine respect on his face. Sara and Jin were cheering. Even the stern military officers were nodding approvingly. Stepped forward and spoke for the first time. If I may add a thought, Your Majesty, what happened here holds a lesson for all of us. We became so specialized, so focused on advanced theory that we forgot the basics. We trusted our instruments more than our eyes. We believed that complex problems must have complex solutions. She looked at with respect. This man reminded us that sometimes you need to climb into the engine space with a flashlight and look with your own eyes. That sometimes the fancy tools miss what simple observation reveals. That experience and practical knowledge are just as valuable as theoretical understanding. Nodded. Exactly. And this lesson will be remembered. From now on, every engineer in the Empire will receive training in basic mechanical work, regardless of their specialty. They will learn to check the simple things before assuming complex causes. They will learn to question their instruments and trust their senses. She addressed the cameras directly. Let this be a message to the entire galaxy. The Empire does not just value advanced technology. We value wisdom. We value practical knowledge. We value those who solve problems rather than just analyze them. And we will reward success wherever it comes from, whether from a palace or a frontier station. The cameras captured it all. The human mechanic in his shabby clothes, standing beside his daughter, receiving honors from the Empress of one of the galaxy's great powers. It was the kind of story that would be told and retold across countless worlds. Later, after the ceremony ended, found himself in a quiet garden with. The palace was still celebrating, but he needed a moment to process everything that had happened. We're going to live here, asked, looking around at the beautiful gardens. In the palace. Looks like it, said, still hardly believing it himself. You'll go to the best school in the Empire. I'll teach engineers and work on interesting projects. It's like a dream. It's not a dream, Dad, said, hugging him tight. You earned this. You saved their ship when nobody else could. I got lucky, said. No, said a voice behind them, approached, carrying 2 cups of some kind of hot drink. He offered one too. You weren't lucky. You were smart. I've been thinking about it for 2 days now, and I finally understand what you did that we couldn't. What's that? Asked. You treated the ship like a machine instead of a theory, explained. We looked at data and diagnostics and quantum mathematics. You looked at physical evidence. You trusted your eyes and your experience over our instruments. That's not luck. That's skill. He sipped his drink thoughtfully. I've already requested assignment to your training program. I want to learn this approach. Theory is important, but I've been so focused on it that I forgot how to think like a mechanic. I want to relearn that. Smiled. I'd be happy to teach you, and maybe you can teach me some of the advanced theory I never learned. We can learn from each other. "I'd like that, Sid." Over the next few days, his life transformed completely. His surgery was scheduled and completed successfully. The doctors said his heart was now as strong as someone half his age, was enrolled in the Imperial Academy and given a beautiful dormitory room that she would move into when classes started, was given a workshop 3 times the size of his old dock on Haven's Edge, filled with tools and equipment he'd only dreamed of owning. But the biggest change was in the engineering core itself. Word of this repair had spread through the entire Imperial fleet. Engineers everywhere were reassessing their approaches, questioning their assumptions, and remembering to check the simple things. A week after the ceremony, gave his first official lesson to a room full of Imperial engineers. Jin and Sora sat in the front row, sat in the back, taking notes. "Welcome," began, feeling more confident now. "I'm not here to tell you that theory is wrong or that your advanced training is useless. Theory is vital. Advanced knowledge is powerful. But today, I want to talk about foundations." He held up his old toolbox. "This has been with me for 25 years. It's beat up and old-fashioned, but it's helped me fix hundreds of ships. Want to know why? Because it contains the basics. A good wrench, a reliable multimeter, a flashlight that works, simple tools for simple problems." He set the toolbox down and looked around the room. The universe is incredibly complex. Quantum mechanics, dimensional physics, artificial intelligence, all of it is amazing and important. But problems are usually simple. They're loose bolts and contaminated lubricants and incorrect specifications and human error. Before you blame exotic physics, check the obvious stuff. Before you trust your scanners completely, trust your eyes too. Jin raised his hand. "How do you balance both? Advanced knowledge and basic practical skills?" "You use both together," said. "Theory tells you how things should work. Practice shows you how they actually work. The gap between should and actually is where you find your answers. They taught us that. The theory said the quantum drives should work. The practice showed they didn't. The answer was in that gap, in the simple maintenance that didn't match the complex requirements." The lesson continued for 2 hours. Shared stories from his years as a mechanic, talked about common mistakes, and emphasized the importance of checking everything from the ground up. The engineers listened intently, asking questions, taking notes. As the class ended, felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. He wasn't just fixing ships to make enough money to survive. He was teaching the next generation to be better engineers. He was making a real difference. That evening, he sat within their new quarters, looking out over the palace gardens as the sun set. "Are you happy, Dad?" asked. Thought about it. He thought about his new heart beating strong in his chest. He thought about his acceptance to the academy. He thought about the engineers who had listened so carefully to his lesson. He thought about the now flying somewhere among the stars, running perfectly on properly maintained drives. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, I'm happy." "Good," said, leaning against him. "Because you deserve it. You always taught me to work hard and do good work and help people when you can. Now everyone can see what I've always known. My dad is amazing." Smiled and put his arm around his daughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons to teach, new problems to solve. But tonight, under the stars of an alien world, a simple mechanic from a forgotten station sat with his daughter and felt content. Sometimes the best solutions really are the simplest ones, and sometimes the greatest rewards are the ones you never expected to receive. All you have to do is show up, do your best, and remember to check the oil before you check the quantum field. The galaxy had learned that lesson, and had learned that fathers who believe in simple things, hard work, practical knowledge, and love for their children can accomplish extraordinary things, even if all they carry is an old toolbox and a willingness to look where others won't.